What is up, my ninjas? I am Strydent, and welcome to my review of the NECA 90s TMNT figures. This review has been a long ass time coming, and I'm happy that I finally got to this. I apologize for how long of a wait there was, but man, life has been. Ugh. I mean, there's been a lot of good. I had a nice Father's Day and whatnot, but as far as getting this review done, I was halfway done when my old computer fucked up. So I'm still working on getting that fixed. And I figured, hey, why not just focus on using my other computer and play around with Filmora a little bit more. So here we are looking at these beautiful, beautiful figures. I'm going to go through and give you a more comprehensive look at these figures, more so than you have seen anywhere else online, or maybe anywhere else on YouTube. I'm gonna give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm gonna use the previous versions of these figures by Playmates as the stick by which we're going to measure all the things that NECA has done right that Playmates may not have done so right. So you know how I do. Get something to eat, something to drink, sit back and relax, and we are going to go through it. Let's knuckle up. So, we're going to start with Leonardo because, he's my favorite, and I have a lot to talk about when it comes to these figures. And since their bodies are generally the same, I'm going to not really jump around so much. I will take the time to show you individually what these guys look like and, small differences, but generally they're the same exact body type. It's probably my only criticism of this set is it's one of the only criticisms I have. I have two major criticisms, but I'll get to those later. With these guys, though, as you can see, we have to compare them to the Playmates TMNT figures, simply because the Playmates TMNT figures were kind of the standard, and for me, it's more comical than that because if you remember trying to get those Playmates figures, they were going for stupid prices that didn't make any sense. And now I want to showcase why they missed the mark and why they are not worth the price that was being asked. But I'm going to put them up against, obviously, the NECA figures, which are superior from just moment one. They're super superior. Now, don't get me wrong. If you cannot find the NECA movie turtles, then the Playmates ones are a decent alternative. Although recently, and I put this up on the Strydent Facebook page, the knockoff versions of the NECA TMNT figures, actually it's not even this version, it's the Comic-Con version where all four of them come in the one box. It's popped up on eBay for $100. So you have options, you could spend $100 on these, the Playmates ones, or you could spend the ridiculous scalper prices on eBay for the NECA turtles, or you could just buy the bootlegs so you can have them on your shelf if you don't plan on playing with them. But as you can see, the Playmates ones, they do a decent job, but they're squat. The shell is too big. There's just no paint. I put spots on my Leo and my Raph. By the time I got around to to the rest of them, I already got the NECA one, so I stopped. But there's no paint on them, and the paint that is there is just kind of meh in the eyes, and usually the eyes are a problem. Leo is one of the figures that did not get hit the hardest with the crappy sculpt work, or poor sculpt work, I should say, because it looks like it shouldn't even be considered sculpt work. It's more of the application job or the assembly job, because the upper head and the scarf or bandana is off from the shape of the face. It's not on kilter. But anyway, let's move on to Raphael real quick so you can see more of what's different. As you can see, the Playmates one is just off. It's entirely off. So there's really no excuse for why that looks so shit. And I don't like to say shit, because what I hear all too often these days is unartistic people giving these harsh critiques on things that they can't do. And it's not even like, oh, this isn't good, or this doesn't look exactly like this, they're like, it's shit. It's garbage. It's this, it's that. And it's like, when the shoe is on the other foot and people criticize what you do, you guys tell us not to, that we're being too harsh and whatnot. So I'm trying not to be like that, even though I'm a harsh critique of my own work. But anyway, there's no excuse. I mean, the body is on point. It looks pretty much like the Ninja Turtle body, but just that face. And that's what you really needed to get in order to sell it. And like Raph, I'm just like, man, get out of here. It almost felt like the Playmates versions were cash-ins, because what we got were cash-ins. I mean, look at the top of his head. There's kind of no excuse for that. That's just lazy. But they still warrant or fetch a ridiculous price. And by far, these are the worst head sculpts on any of the Ninja Turtles that I can think of, past, present, and future. And the old Playmates line from the 80s and 90s had some horrendous sculpts. I mean, there were a couple that were just like, whoo, shit. And it wasn't 100% because the sculpt itself was just like poorly done. It was like conceptual, thematically, I mean, the execution of the Playmates figures for the most part were pretty damn good, and that's kind of why I'm so harsh on these. I mean, look at the dent in his chest. Why? How did you miss that? Even Raph, like NECA Raph, can't believe that shit. Like, really? You're supposed to be me? You know what I mean? That's literally what he's looking at him like. For real? For real, son? You really think you look like me? I don't believe you look anything like me at all. Seriously? For real? Where do they get these guys? I mean, you could just look at them and it's just like, what the fuck, man? Like, ugh. Come on, guys. Come on, guys. I mean, look at the layers of detail on this face. And it looks just like what we all watched in that movie. And it's not like all the reference is not there. You know what I'm saying? I'm not the greatest sculptor, but when I do sculpt, I use a shit ton of reference to make sure that I'm getting things correctly. Even if it's something that doesn't exist, I find the thing that's closest to that and I reference it. That's all that has to be done here. That's what these guys did. You know what I mean? They just took tons of reference and they tried to get it as close to the reference as possible. There's nothing wrong with that when you're making something commercially like this that exists. You're remaking it in a different scale. That's literally what we're looking for. It wouldn't make sense for you to do it any other way. So when you look at them side by side, you can see details on the suits that are on the NECA version that are nowhere to be found on the Playmates version. Proportionately, it's just the wrong proportions on the Playmates side. And I don't want to sit here and just knock them nonstop, but I mean, there's a lot to knock because the same reference was used. The same, reference point or points, plural, was used. Jesus. And somehow they missed it. I don't understand. Now, they did get the cuts in the shell. Most versions of Raph, it could be the cartoon versions, it could be the comic book versions. Most versions of Raph have those scratches or cuts in the shell somewhere. That's a pretty cool idea that seems to have, stuck around on most versions of the figure. Of course, the NECA version has it. I mean, like, you don't even have to wonder if that would be a thing. It's there. And it looks amazing. There's more scratches on this one than on the Playmates one, because like I said, they used the reference. That's all they needed to do was consult the reference, and the more you consult the reference, the better the end result is going to be when you have something like this. Even the colors, consult the reference. You don't really need to have thousands upon thousands of colors. You just need to mix the right ones to get the effect. You see the browns and the greens in the shell. It's very simple. And it would have been cost effective too if done right. And you see NECA did it and you see Playmates did not, and those two figures cost the same amount of money. Now some people would say, What you lack in paint and sculpt, you get in articulation. But if you articulate a body that doesn't really look like, the source material, is it really worth the money? I mean, look at them. It's like Raph is like the Playmates. Raph is like I mean, just forget about it. I'm not even going to go into more detail. But no, I mean, he's like the 1000th clone. You know how after you duplicate something so many times, by the time you get to the tail end of it, usually the procedure or the process starts to fail. That's what he looks like. I mean, he's just like, ugh. He's missing all the things that would make him. Anyway, we're moving along. Let's talk about Michelangelo. Now, Michelangelo, I really don't have too much negative to say about Michelangelo at all. I mean, I really have nothing negative to say about the NECA turtles in general, but the Playmates Mike actually is not as bad as the others because they got the face sculpt pretty on point. I mean, if you remember in the film, he was the smallest of the four, which kind of sucks that neither company made him smaller, but they at least they got the childlike kind of the somewhat childlike innocence. They captured it because they gave him at least one face that has that look, you know what I mean, that feels like he's the youngest one of the bunch, and I dig that. They failed with the nunchucks. They gave him this ginormous chain when he actually had a rope. These are all things that, like I said, if you're using the same source material, you would see it. But to ignore it is just lazy. But you see what I'm saying. There's that shape, that overall, it's like the typical Ninja Turtle shape for shape of the head, or head shape that we were all taught to draw when we drew Ninja Turtles as kids. It's what the cartoon characters looked like, and it's what kind of managed to survive all the different incarnations of the comics, all the way up to Santoluco's, his take on them. But he's still there's things missing. I mean, there's detail missing. His musculature, he's a little too bulky. The turtles were not bodybuilders. I mean, they had nice physiques, they had muscles, you know what I'm saying? But they weren't as bulky as the Playmates figures are. And I mean, overall, he almost looks like a fan costume, like a good fan costume of the Ninja Turtles. And I don't think that cuts it for what these guys go for now. I mean, it's a little bit on the excessive side, but they are pretty expensive, and it's weird that people are paying those prices. You would think they wouldn't be up for that. You would think that more people would look at them and be like, nah, I have options. I'm not going to stick with this, But like I said before, if this was all you were looking for, the essence is there for the Playmates, but you can't beat the NECA. It's just you can't beat them. It's just too much of a they were just so on point. It's too much of a gap between the two when it comes to accuracy that it's really hard to look at, the Playmates one and even consider it when I'm looking at, the NECA figures. It's just, I couldn't. I would have to get the bootlegs, and $100 for all of them, as opposed to, 150, 140, 200, 400, 500. I mean, the prices are all over the place on eBay. So, I hate to be like that guy who's always saying, bootleg, but I mean, the prices for these figures are starting to get ridiculous, to the point where it's not fun. Now look at this head sculpt. This is where we have problems. This is where we have problems. I mean, Lord have mercy. Look at that head. Like he's going to eat your soul along with that pizza. Good God. But anyway, Michelangelo looks the part. He feels right. The details are there. They did a really good job with him. And when you consider how the subtleties that were captured on the NECA version with that face, mostly, because you can understand where they cut corners as far as having the turtles all have the same physique, because generally they do have the same physique in a general sense. Did I say generally too many times? But you get what I'm saying. Overall, they have the same kind of body. They just vary in height and proportions and such. But you can see why. But they make up for it with these head sculpts. Now let's get to Donatello. Donatello is one of my favorites because he has a very distinct face, extremely distinct. It's really hard to not. How do I put this? It would be really hard to say that is Donatello if you don't get the face right. I mean, look at that. That's not Donatello. No, 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 no. Now this is Donatello. I mean, it's blatantly obvious. The other one doesn't look. Oof, oof. And it's little things. I mean, you see that snout. He has that overbite. I mean, it's just weird because there's very specific details that make these designs work. I pointed this stuff out when I did my review of of the Playmates figures because I showed you they have very distinct faces. Because I mean, one of the problems that the toy designers faced, and they wanted rectified, and it's the reason why they all have different color headbands to begin with and different types of belts and stuff, is that before, when they all wore red, they all looked exactly the same, which thematically made sense because they're a ninja clan. They're supposed to kind of feel like, interchangeable in a sense, because the enemy should not, I don't know why I just hit my mic so many times. But anyway, the enemy should not be able to tell them apart. The idea should be you don't know how many of this clan actually exist. Like, how many enemies are you fighting? So, when you go the extra mile in live action, you're going to have to make them visually stand out. And that's where Playmates visually they stand out, but what the movie did right, Playmates skimped on. And it's really weird because, as you're going to see in a little bit, they got this stuff right back in the 90s with their first movie star turtles. But this Donatello figure is dope. He's got the same level of articulation as the others. He's got, wonderful paint. The head sculpt is where it's at, though. I mean, you only get one head sculpt, which kind of sucks, but, and that's probably one of my complaints. But, I mean, all in all, Donnie helps complete the set. I think these guys are phenomenal as a group, and like the details and the attitude and personality, it's all there, and it's subtleties that make these things possible. A lot of times you see toy companies capture the essence of the character and not get it spot on to how you saw it before. But here they did that. But I want to make some comparisons. Let's compare movie star Raph to his current counterpart. That is how you do it. You know what I mean? Like, granted, that toy is what, 30 years old, something like that. It still looks the part, and that's what you want. You know what I'm saying? It's refreshing, but it's weird because when you think about how old that figure is, and then you think about all the people who supposedly are Ninja Turtle fans, and either based on the fact that they were born a lot later or the fact that they didn't think about it or whatever, they have no idea that Playmates did this right years ago, and this is what you could compare it to. I mean, it's not that difficult, you know what I mean? And as people who review action figures, it's our job to go back and point some of this stuff out so that people who are going to jump into collecting action figures, they can see kind of the history and the progression of how we got to this point. I mean, you look at this Raph and you see the movie version. I mean, complete with the ties around his wrist, the whole nine. And you can see that it's a step up from what Playmates did previously. Now here's Leo, movie Leo, compared to Shredder from the recent cartoon line. I have so much to say about that line because a lot of people are not going to get to see those figures until bootlegs show up, of course, or unless, they get to, I don't know, unless they get to re-release those figures, you know what I'm saying? And hopefully they will, because I would like to get the rest of them because they're well done figures. I just don't want them for the price that they're asking. It's too much. But as you can see, he stands a lot taller than the human figures, which the turtles should be shorter. So I mean, it's a different scale, different figures, different lines. So there you go. All right, let's talk accessories. So the accessories that you get here are a decent amount. Is a decent little assortment. I think each of them came with, there should be one more piece of pizza, but you did not get a TCRI can, and there's no extra heads or anything like that. I don't even think the quarter scale ones came with extra heads, but each of them came with, I think each of them came with all those hands, or at least close to it. What they did here was each of them come with an additional set of hands, which gives you 4 different types of hands plus their holding things hands, and you can interchange between them because they're all the same shade of green, which I think is a smart way of pulling that off. I would have liked them to be more like the regular NECA Ultimates, where you get extra heads and tons of accessories and all that good stuff. Dirks, grappling hooks, which they didn't use in the movie. So I guess dirks, the extra heads is the main thing, so you get more expressions. But I'm content with what we have. We've been waiting a long time for these figures because people like us, people like me, we were not going to go to San Diego Comic-Con to pay, almost $200 for the box set. And when I tried to buy them online, they were sold out within seconds of them popping up on NECA's site. So, for me, this was one of those things where it was like, fuck. At first, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get these fucking things. And then they just popped up. So I was like, when they showed that GameStop was going to be carrying these guys individually, I was like, I am going to get them. They are going to be mine. They're going to be part of my collection. And they are going to replace those lame-ass turtles right over there. And people have said things like, oh, they're not so bad. And if you completely hate NECA, then they're fine. But if you know what NECA is capable of, then there's no excuse. They're so good. And it's weird because they're technically not as expensive as these guys over here. And these guys do a little less than these guys. They even come with less, you know what I mean? But there's a lot that I'm going to get into because you know me. I'm a big Ninja Turtle fan. I've been a Ninja Turtle fan for most of my life since I learned about the Turtles in the 80s, late 80s, and it's never changed. So I am going to get into it. They are everything I was hoping for. If I never get another NECA figure again, I'd be cool because they embody everything that I want out of NECA figures, with a few little exceptions. Now, as amazing as they are not perfect. But I can tell you this much without really going into more, because this is a, more of a chill kind of sit-down type review or video. The only thing they're lacking in is some of the articulation. And the things I mean are, they have amazing sculpt. The articulation points, actually, let me use my pointer. The articulation points, like double jointed knees, they have double jointed elbows technically. It's the same kind of joints that you see on many Japanese figures with the, like the joint is here, and then you have the bicep and the forearm, and because they have the, you can kind of see it here. You see how there's the shoulder pad, and then there's the forearm and the bicep. It's just like on Japanese figures, a lot of Japanese figures. The problem is that the knee pads and the elbow pads prevent you from utilizing all that articulation. So while you do get a decent bend, it's not the most amazing bend, which sucks ass, like terribly sucks ass. And a lot of people, as they always do, new figure, it's got to be the best thing ever. They can't really call it for what it is, so there's a lot of videos just saying that they're perfect and their articulation is amazing. And Everything is a 10 out of 10 because we've waited so long to have, 6-inch movie style Ninja Turtles from NECA after we saw how amazing their 1/4 scale Ninja Turtles were. And I think that's bullshit. That's usually the problem that I have with modern reviewers and the way that they choose to review things, is that they just get so gung-ho about a new thing to the point where it just gets stupid. It's like, we can't always just be completely blown away by the latest thing that comes out, regardless of how well it does or does not do the things that it set out to do. That's stupid. Because otherwise, you end up with companies like Hasbro, who can do very amazing things and who is prolific in the action figure game, but they tend to slack, and they slack more and more on their more popular lines, their Star Wars and their Marvel Legends, because they know that the fans are just going to say it's all gravy. But NECA is no different, although they do tend to maintain a certain level of quality. But back to the articulation, it's not perfect. The articulation is there. Aspects of that articulation work really well, and then others don't. A lot has changed since these bad boys in 2008, but a lot has stayed the same. I kind of wish that they just had traditional double jointed elbows that fit in here, more along the lines of how their legs were done, more along the lines of how Marvel Legends do it, because that way, if they had sculpted the elbow pad instead of making the elbow pad a separate piece of plastic, because this is separate from the rest, it kind of sits on that middle joint that holds the arm together from the two ends. If it was sculpted, then you would have, freedom of movement, and you have less issues, like, you see how that just bends? You don't have to worry about it. You would have the same thing. It just would bend, and you don't have to worry. But instead, you have to worry because they did not make it, work to the best of their ability. But, like I said, I'm a huge fan of NECA. Literally, these are the 3 versions of their figures. People are going to be like, no, there's 4. There is 4. But the 4th version is pretty much this, but painted in video game pixelated colors. So, me being a Leonardo fan, I had to pick this up. I have thoughts about these figures, but they're coming. They'll be the next sit-down review that we do. I don't know if this will be a regular thing, like a sit-down Sunday type deal or something, because that seems to be the thing. ODC started doing that a long time ago. He stopped. Bobby Skullface started doing it. I used to do quick reviews, but I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, back to what we were talking about in the first place. The NECA figures, these NECA turtles are amazing, with very few exceptions, and those exceptions mostly are the articulation. These guys are not perfect when it comes to articulation, and I was hoping that they would be, but they're pretty close considering what we typically get from NECA. The problem is that despite their limitations, Playmates beat them out when it came to articulation. They did a lot of the same things that I was talking about that needed to be done. I mean, like, they overdid it. Come on, Raph. Hold on to your pizza, homie. They did a lot of stuff. Let me pull these guys over here. Keep the other turtles in the back. We're going to use Leo a lot. Since he's my favorite, he will be the kind of the stick by which we measure everybody, because the turtles do have one body. So essentially that's what you get all across the board. They did not make Michelangelo smaller than his brothers, because if you saw the movie, he was the shorter one of the bunch. Instead, they made him about the same size. But anyway, so Leonardo stands, they all stand roughly within the 6 to 7 inch scale. I want to say they're more on the 7-inch side of things. We can measure them in front of the camera so you guys can see where they fall. They're not quite 7 inches. They're about 6.5. You see that? To the top of Leo's head. It's about 6.5, you know? Anyway, they're tall, you know? And people bitched about it when I said, why are the turtles so big? Their movie, the actors in the films were short because the turtles are supposed to be about 5 feet. They're supposed to be 4 feet tall, but they were about 5 in the film. And, they're like, oh, they're supposed to be their own thing. They're supposed to be this, that, and the third, whatever. Well, here's the thing. These are the first NECA turtles that they did. And I get it. They're comic book accurate, but look at how short they are. These are the Playmates movie figures. This is movie star Leo. Look how tiny he is, right? So it went from this to this. I'm going to actually pull back a little bit. And then here's the latest turtles that NECA made. Look at how short they are. I want you to see like the trend, and then here's the movie ones. Why do they have to be that much taller? They don't, but NECA kind of slacked in that area. They were not trying to make them fit any specific motif as far as size goes. So instead of keeping them on the short side, they just made them as tall as most of the NECA figures are. Don't believe me? Here, let me show you. Here's NECA T800 from T2. It's one of my favorite figures. I love it because I'm an Arnold dork. At work the other day, we were just talking about Arnold films, and I just went off imitating stuff. Look at them. They're roughly the same height. There's just a little bit of difference. I mean, you can see it. Just a tiny little bit of difference, you know? He's like a half a head shorter than Arnold. But why? Why is he even in the same realm as Arnold? He should be short, you know? Playmates. Here's the Playmates, cartoon Ninja Turtles, right? Look at how short they are compared to the movie, compared to NECA's previous Ninja Turtles, and compared to NECA's latest Ninja Turtles. It's like everybody knows that the turtles should be on the short side. Sorry. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. You can tell that they're aware of the size, you know what I'm saying? And they just kind of went away from that for some reason. It's a nitpick though, because it doesn't take away from how awesome they are. It's just one of those things. I find myself, because of my Soda Street Fighter figures, I find myself more on the scale, snob side, because certain figures, certain characters have to have a general size, and it bugs me when they don't. Like, I love that like Super Sentai figures tend to be on the smaller side, but I this is the Figuarts Zero, but I miss the Ultra Act Zero's height. I always felt like Ultramen should be tall, you know what I'm saying? If we're not going to get 12-inch versions, they should be taller, right? But anyway, it's something that I complain about a lot, because in my Soda Street Fighter collection and in the Marvel Legends collections and, in my various Ninja Turtle collections, they get the size right. You know what I'm saying? The size works. And I don't really have to complain very much about it because they do such a good job with it. Anyway, back to what we were starting to talk about. The NECA Turtles versus the Playmates ones, because a lot of people will complain and say, why are you pointing out this stuff about the two different types of turtles? They're two different lines trying to achieve two different things. And the reality is that they're not trying to achieve two different things. They're literally trying to achieve the same things. Movie lines are just trying to represent movie figures. I am a movie line collector. Most of my favorite figures are versions of comic book characters as seen on film. So I've been at this for a long time, and you know, I've noticed these differences and these the positives and the negatives, and you know, I honestly I've been doing this long enough to come to a conclusion when it comes to these kinds of figures, you know, and my conclusion is usually obvious based on what the figures do. So you can see it's the same figures. Look at the face sculpts. Remember we were talking about this, and then I'm gonna get into their articulation. But let me get up close so you can see that. Look at the faces. You see how, like, I was saying that this Leo, even though I put the dots on him, there are little dots all over this Leo. He's got them on his face, the top of his head. I kind of went overboard with mine. But, like, that was something that those turtles had. Look at the movie star turtles. Gives you another example of where I was coming from with all this stuff. I mean, they overdid it. But I mean, look at all the dots and stuff on him. There's dots on his legs, on his shoulders, and they're kind of bright, but he's got them on his head, on his face. He's got dots and stuff. He also has cuts and scratches on his shell, the front shell. And one strap instead of two. You know, there's all kinds of weird things, but this was the 90s, and those were kids' toys. You know, they weren't supposed to be perfect. But you see what I'm saying about the amount of detail on Playmates' old try versus their new try. And then when you move to NECA, it's like, holy shit, everything is there. Everything is there. So, you know, they did the damn thing as far as making these guys, you know, official and the right look, the right amount of paint, the right everything. It's the only area that they kind of, you know, shat the bed with is the engineering of some of the articulation. Like, these guys have double jointed elbows. There's no problem. And they also still have the elbow pad is a separate piece of plastic, you know? And it's the same thing with the wristband and the knee pad. Separate piece of plastic. And it doesn't hinder the double jointed, the double joint very much at all. On the NECA figure, it prevents them from doing just about anything. And it sucks because it's not the way I would have liked it to be, you know? I want them to be posable. I want to utilize all the articulation, and for whatever reason, even though the Playmates ones have too much articulation, the NECA ones, like the knees, don't bend all the way because of the plastic. You see that? Which is lame. The elbows don't bend all the way because of the plastic. You really got to move the elbow pad as much as you can out of the way and then try to bend the arm. And you still only get that much. That's not that good for me. So there's some things that need work. The torso. That's an area of contention for me. I got so much shit around me on this, on my review station. It's ridiculous. The torso is like, it's like a diaphragm joint on a Marvel Legends or on a Figuarts. So you get a sideways, you know, you get all that, and you get a little bit of crunch forward, but because this is not, it doesn't really give this front shell, the moving forward, you only get a little bit. What's cool though is you see in here, you get this cool, I'm going to actually get closer. You get this cool, like, you see that? All that wrinkleness up in there, wrinkliness. And so like when you move him, you get a little bit less. When you move him forward, you get more. So you see that? It's like a hinge in there. It's pretty dope. I was surprised that they did that. I was like, wow, okay. Thank you for these cool details that I saw in the film, but I didn't realize that they were going to put in there. But the face, we got to look at the faces up close because I pointed this out in the video when I reviewed the Playmates turtles, and I think more needs to be said about it. Look at the faces, and they even did a decent job trying to imitate the face, but like it's just not there. Then you look on the freaking the NECA face, and it's there. I mean, God, look at that. Look at how clean that face is. Get up under it a little bit, or head on. Even the texture, man, it's just like, it's dope. The shape of his head too, like they had these long ovular heads, whereas the Playmates ones did the traditional, action figure version. The movie ones did the movie version, which is what they were supposed to do. That's what they set out to do. So, when I was making my critiques about these figures here, they were valid critiques. I was pointing out things that are objectively wrong with the figures. I mean, looking at them and looking at the faces they gave them, and that's not even the face that Leo came with. That's just the face that I chose of the bunch that I liked better. And remember, I have the Secret of the Ooze versions of the Turtles. I didn't have the first, the 1990s Ninja Turtle film classics. I missed out on those. So, getting the NECA Turtles is twofold for me. Also, look at the weapons and the hands that hold the weapons. These hands actually do what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? They're holding hands that actually hold onto the turtles. Like the turtles can actually hold on to them. Okay, look at the hands. They're holding hands. Whereas the hands that these guys came with, the NECA Turtles, the Playmates versions, they have way too many, they're articulated. I had to glue them shut just so that they would hold their weapons tight. They also have like a little divot in their hand that you fit the weapon in so that they can hold on to their weapon. So there's a lot of weird things that you're pulling off with, this one, where they over-engineered things and made it do too many things, whereas you could have just given them dedicated hands and then gave us, extra hands for when they're not holding the weapon and they want to point or something like that. Just give us extra hands. So in a little slick move, NECA managed to allow us to do a whole bunch of things with these turtles by giving us the traditional way of doing it, giving us extra hands, giving us dedicated hands to do specific things instead of giving us a shitload of joints to try to achieve the same thing and then run the risk of having a figure that over time, if you pose it and do stuff with it, it'll get slack. So you have to give them props for that. You know what I mean? Like, even though I wish they had more accessories and, extra heads, things like that, what you got gives you the same ability to, pose your figure and present your figure on your shelf the best way that you can without you having to have a bag full of stuff to achieve that, You got enough hands, you got enough little extra details, just you got enough, So I'm cool with all that. So now we're at the bottom line. So you know me, usually when I get here, I'm doing my best to sum up all the things and let you know what's going on and let you see what's going on. And as you can already see, these guys are top tier. There's nothing really for you to, nothing more for you to ask for. I made some points about things that could have been there, kind of like extras. But overall, every single one of them is up to, that wonderful standard that NECA usually does with their better figures ever since they started introducing articulation to their movie figures. Their posability is nice. The paint and sculpt is really nice. They're super accurate. They look the part. The only place that they're lacking is two places, and that's the articulation is, kind of what you expect from NECA. But you can still, as you can see, you can still get them to do a whole bunch of stuff. And they don't have super accurate anatomy, when it comes to the different turtles. If you watch the movie, you'll see that, like Raph, he was pretty damn like muscular, like kind of buff. He looked a little bit bigger. Leo was a little bit kind of on the lankier side. Donatello was a little bit on the top heavy side, or maybe he was more, balanced in his musculature. I can't remember. And then Michelangelo was really small compared to the others. But you know, a lot of people, it's enough that you don't notice, you know, and a lot of people don't notice this stuff. So maybe that's what it is, you know, and they're capitalizing off of that. But if you're like me and you're a dork for that sort of thing, you'll notice. Um, Outside of that, though, it's just quality, man. There's not much else to ask for. The designs look good. The paint, like I said, sculpt. The accessories are nice, and everything's pretty sturdy. It's not like when you get some import figures and you're just like, you know, fuck, this thing's gonna fall apart. Nah, it's pretty sturdy. I didn't have any quality control issues. And I think that right there helps, you know, kind of top off everything. I mean, you have beautiful looking figures. They have all the stuff they need to be quality gifts or just quality on your shelf, and no quality control issues. And that works for me. So if you can find them for under $100, get them. You will not be sorry. It's not a waste of money. They're quality. If you cannot find them for under $100, pay the $100 for the bootleg set. Do whatever you have to do to make them look perfect, and you know, make them. They'll probably occupy your shelf just fine, but don't settle for anything else. Leave the Playmates ones behind unless that's the only thing you can find, and that's it. So this has been my look at the NECA TMNT from the movie. They are totally worth your time. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And as always, peace outside.